Here you see my experimentation for this particular process. You can see here, this is made with a 1-inch space and 1 1/4 inch spaces on either side, and a 1/4 inch wide fill. So it's going to give you something that looks like this. Now, if I were going to be making it in 3/8 of an inch, I used 1 1/2 on either end with the 1-inch space between. So you have something that's a little beefier. So the point here being, these two guidelines are really guidelines. You can experiment with your cord, you can experiment with your spacing so that you can get something that fits your particular taste. But this is a good starting point. Now that I have everything turned right side out, you can see I decided to go with the white shoelace rather than the black to make this tubing. So it's turned right side out. And one thing I like to do is just to set everything. Give it some steam and smooth the cover. Let me zoom in a little bit so you can see it a little better. And you continue all the way down. So I will go off camera and finish and bring back the results. Okay, so let me just show you. You have a really nice, smooth finish. No twists, no bubbles. Everything is now ready to make the trim. This is the sample. We want to actually put our trim around this area here. So our first step before we actually prepare our paper is we want to take a measurement of the circumference. So you can see here, I'm going to begin there and just measure around. It's better to measure it a little long rather than short because you can actually back this off if you need to. So bringing this all around, we have 11 inches. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say 12 inches so that we have a little extra to make the turn of cloth to get around this armhole. So using that 12 inches, we're going to go on to the next step of preparing the paper. I have my piece of paper here. I have the finished length marked here. These two lines are 1 inch apart, and I'm using the friction pen, the heat disappearing pens, because we don't want to stain the stitches, because these two lines are going to be stitching guides. So since we're using the 1/4 inch wide rouleau, I want to draw a line here and another here. So as I said, this is 1 inch here, 1 1/4 inch there, as well as here. So this here is the piece of paper prepared for the stitching. So here we are at the machine. These two lines are the stitching lines. So to begin, what I like to do is this mark here gives me a total of 10 inches extra, because we want that if we're going to be linking it up under the arm on our sample later. So the stitch length is a 2.5 stitch. I'm going to start a little bit ahead of this to get it going. And you may have to raise and lower your presser foot a little bit to get this started. Okay, so now this line here and this line here are the outer widths of the trim. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to fold this back so that you see there, that should match. And you mash the two up together, and then again, because you want these little loops to just, when you're folding it, you want that just to touch, maybe go a hair over this boundary here. So really, we're just going to be working back and forth. So I will sew 2 or 3 of these, and when possible, you want to make sure those seams kind of go to the side rather than on the top. This may seem a little time consuming, but hey, it's going to make a beautiful trim when we're done. So now let me just sew a couple more, and then I will meet you at the other end. And here we are. One more. Yes, okay. Okay, so I'm going to continue down, working to the end. I will bring you back the results. Now, as you can see, I've run short. Now, I've intentionally run short so that you can see how to join on another cord to this particular operation. So now what I'm going to do here is I want to figure out where the two are going to join. So I'm going to put this pin right here. So from here, I'm going to get a ruler and measure back. So this is 1 1/8 inches. So I'm going to cut off that there, and then pull this back and measure out that 1 1/8 inches. Because what we want to do is we want to thin out the cord, and actually it's going to be right about there. So thin that out like so, and then pull this back so that when we bring this in, okay, so now I'm going to show you a little trick here. Raise this, and I'm going to fold this back because I want to back tack. There we go. There we go. Okay. And let me trim this away. So that's the old one coming off. Next, I need to prepare the new one. So really, what I'm going to do is thin out the new cord. And like so. And trim this off close. And make one more row of stitching. So we've caught that. So what's going to happen is that little join is going to disappear when we later chain the trim. So now let me just keep working ahead. There we go. Okay, almost done. Okay, let's draw out. Let me get the work out of the machine, give you a good look at what we've created. So, here we have the first row sewn all the way down. And like I said, this little join here, that will disappear when we're making the trim. Next, we want to sew the opposite row. As we did on the other side, we're going to sew down this line. And you can see that it's a little easier because you have the first row laid in place. Okay, so again, let's remove everything from the machine. So you can see there is the setup. Next, I will meet you at the pressing table. From here, I like to just flatten out these, get them sorted so that they're not so overlappy, if that's a word. And one of the advantages of doing this is when you steam it, as you can see, the ink marks go away. So you're doing two things at once here to prepare for the next step. Okay, so here we are. We're ready now to start chaining the loops. We begin with the crochet hook. As you can see here, this is a size I believe that's what that tells us here. It's a rather large crochet hook. And so really, let me just zoom in here. There. So what you're doing is you're coming in from the front and you're chaining each loop all the way up. I will proceed to the end, bring you back the results. Almost finished. And so here you can just make sure that everything is centered. So this is one side. Now back to chain the other side. As before, you begin chaining. And again, I'll continue up and meet you at the other end. As you can see, heading towards the finish. And there we have it. So now, this is where just a little bit of steam to make sure everything sets properly is useful. So, then what I also like to do is to push the braids so they fall over the machine stitching. So now, if you notice, right there is the join. So the beauty of this is you can conceal a join, so you can have a continuous strip of this trim that's quite long. You don't have to worry so much about running out because you know now how to join a new cord to the existing row. Next, we want to tear off the backing. This is what the work looks like from behind. So it's easier, I found, when you are tearing the paper. It's easier to fold it and run a fingernail along, and then tear it like you tear a check out of a checkbook for those people who still write checks. But you can see the very short stitches make tearing easier. So that's just a good little rule to keep in your head. The shorter the stitch, the easier it makes to tear it away from the paper. And you're going to have a few little bits of paper that stick into the stitches. That's no big deal. You can pick those out later. And this comes out. So now, you can see these stitches. Another reason I didn't mention earlier about why I like to use the friction pens is that, especially if you're working on white, if you were to draw your lines with a regular pencil, you would see the graphite catch in the stitches and you would soil the stitches. So drawing your lines with the friction pen makes it so that when everything's done, you don't have any evidence of the marking. So from here, we want to actually put this onto our sample.